Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. No, those aren't little white flowers on your woody perennials and shrubs. Look a little closer. What is it? It's not a flower. It looks and feels like a wad of spit. Well, that would be the cocoon for the aptly named spittlebug. What's a gardener to do about this pest, which can be found throughout North America? America's favorite retired college horticulture professor, Debbie Flower, and myself tackle that and more of your garden questions today, including, should you eat green potatoes? Why does my boxwood shrub smell like cat urine? What's all this white mold I'm finding around the roots of my plants? It's all in today's episode number 275, Spittlebugs, and more of your questions and answers. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon Jungle in Suburban Purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Let's go. Perhaps you're walking down the street and you notice a plant with a pretty little white flower on it. I've seen it on rosemary and lavender, and you get a little closer and you recoil and think, who's been spitting on this plant? It looks like a gob of spit. Yuck. Sorry about that, but that's what it looks like. It's from the spittlebug. How aptly named. Debbie Flower is here, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor. And Debbie, the spittlebug seems to, it's in all 50 states. It's in Canada. In fact, I think I sent you a PDF of about 90 pages of the Spittlebugs of Canada,
yes.
which I always thought would be a great name for a band. But Spittlebugs, I think it looks worse than it actually is.
I agree. It is pretty gross looking, especially because it looks just like somebody recently spit into your plant.
Yeah.
And that's no fun.
And it feels like it, too.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of slimy.
What's inside that spit? The
insect, the nymphs. So this is an insect that is sucking feeder, punctures the plant and gets into the xylem of the plant where the sugars are being transported, absorbs that and uses that for its own nutrition. And the adult lays eggs, and the eggs hatch, and they have several instars or stages of growth where they just get a little bigger and get a little bigger and get a little bigger. And in the second instar, they cover themselves with spittle. And it's a protection. They do have natural enemies in the plant world. Other insects that we are known for being beneficial. We call them beneficial insects, like assassin bugs, minute pirate bugs, and syrphid fly larvae. We'll eat them, but with this spittle around them, they're less desirable. And so what you do as the proud owner of a plant with spittlebugs is you just spray the plant with water and wash the spittle off of them. Now, they have the ability to make it again, and so you'll have to come out tomorrow and check for the spittlebugs masses again and spray it off. But by washing it off, you're exposing that insect to natural predators that will potentially come and eat it.
And you're not harming the natural predators with a jet of water.
Right. And you're not harming the plant either.
Yeah. And you're cleaning the plant.
Yes. And in a dry climate like ours, the plants are usually appreciative of that if they could talk, right?
Spittlebugs, I could see how they could be confused with leafhoppers. Very similar.
Similar body.
Similar movement, too.
The head, yes. The head is wider than the tail. It comes to sort of a point at the tail. I read, although I've never heard anybody say, that they're sometimes called
frog's head.
Frog's head, yes, because they lift their heads above their rears when they're in a resting position. A leafhopper tends to be more straight horizontal. But really, the identifying characteristic is that spittle.
I guess in certain crops, spittlebugs can vector certain plant pathogens that causes like oleander leaf scorch, Pierce's disease of grapes, which is a serious problem with grapes. But then most leafhoppers do distribute Pierce's disease. Mm-hmm. But again, this is slightly different than a leafhopper.
It is. Right. Correct.
The good news is spittlebugs are one of the favorite foods of birds.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, they're seasonal.
Yeah.
They'll pop up and people freak out. What's all over my plant? And spring, I would say, is their season. And you spray them down and they get eaten.
Yeah. I like to leave some spittle on a plant just to see which beneficial insects are attracted to it. Because besides the birds going after the adults, the nymphs are attacked by assassin bugs, minute pirate bugs, syrphid larvae. And if you got kids and you want to teach them about, the good bugs, it helps to have a problem plant.
Yes.
Where you might see the good guys swarming. I've been using my milkweed plant lately as a good example of that attracts the golden aphid. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of ladybugs there. There's a lot of the juvenile ladybugs, the larvae that looks like, I still say it looks like a alligator in a San Francisco Giants warm-up jacket, sort of black and orange, which is much longer than a ladybug and much faster. It moves too. But at least then you can get a good idea of who the good guys are.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You got to learn what they look like. There used to be a poster you could get from California Ag and Natural Resources of the good guys.
Yeah.
And I always emphasized that in teaching because there are so many more bad guys than that's actually not true. There are actually more good guys. But to know these good guys, so you don't kill them, it's very important.
It's called Know Your Beneficial Insects, this poster, and you can download it from the internet, and I'll have a link to that in today's show notes. I have one hanging above the freezer in the garage.
All right. Perfect place.
Yes.
Anytime you go out to the freezer, you get to learn something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the spittlebug then it can be controlled easily with a blast of water because you're doing in the young. I think once they fall off, they don't come back.
I think that's true as well.
Yeah, much like aphids in that regard. And you may not have to go out every day either. I've found that going out every 2 or 3 days and waiting for those little white flowers to appear again.
Yes. And then when the new eggs hatch and they've gone through their first stage, then they get into their second stage, that's when they can produce the spittle. And then again, if you live in a warm climate, as the weather warms, they will disappear. Yes.
Yeah. So spittlebugs, they're interesting to see. Not a big threat, really, unless they carry one of those diseases and you have one of those crops. Yeah. I mean, if you love your oleanders, you might want to. And not a lot of us have talking about the whole country, have access to oleanders. Yeah, it's more of a USDA Zone 9 and 10 screening shrub, really, that has freeway median. It used to be. Till it got attacked by pests. Yeah. University of California says that you can ignore spittlebugs or wash the nymphs off with a forceful stream of water. Spittlebugs are more likely to become abundant on woody plants when they migrate from nearby herbaceous hosts. Cut spittlebug-infested weeds in the spring before the insects mature and spread. That's a good idea. Right. That's a good idea for many things, is to cut the weeds down, because a lot of the insects that are pests in our garden spend some time there early in the season, and then they move into our luscious crops. The bad bug demilitarized zone, as I like to call it, to have an area, if you have a big enough garden, to have maybe a 15-foot wide swath of clearing of weeds, so that if whatever pest may be over in the taller weeds in your neighbors, if they try to come over, they might get picked off by a bird. Right. Or it's such a long distance, they don't fly very well, or they don't walk very far. They can't get there. Right. All right. Spittlebugs. We'll have a picture of it in today's show notes. Thank you, Debbie. You're welcome, Fred. You've heard me talk about the benefits of Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric containers. Smart Pots are sold around the world. They're proudly made 100% right here in the USA. Smart Pots is the oldest and still the best of all the fabric plant containers that you might find. Many of these imitators are selling cheaply made fabric pots that fall apart quickly, but not Smart Pots. There are satisfied Smart Pot owners who have been using the same Smart Pots for over a decade, actually approaching 20 years. When you choose Smart Pot fabric containers, you know you'll be having a superior growing experience with the best product on the market. And your plants will appreciate Smart Pots too. Because of the 1 million microscopic holes in Smart Pots, your soil will have better drainage and the roots will be healthier. Those roots won't be going round and round on the outside of the soil ball like you see in so many plastic pots. The air pruning qualities of smart pots creates more branching of the roots, and that'll fill more of the usable soil in the smart pot. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful fabric containers. And don't forget that /Fred part, because on that page are details of discounts when you buy Smart Pots at Amazon. Maybe you want to see them before you buy? Not a problem. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers as well as select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you or to buy online, visit smartpots.com/Fred. Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred for more information and that special Farmer Fred discount. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. We like to answer your garden questions here on the Garden Basics Podcast. Debbie Flower is here, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor. And Don from Wisconsin sends us a note and says, is it okay to cut off the green portion of a potato and use the rest of the potato, or should the entire potato be disposed of? I remember my mom telling my sister and I not to eat the green on potatoes, so I didn't. But as time went by and I got smarter in my own mind, I just assumed that was an old wives' tale. Yeah, right, because it was your mother. What do mothers know? And began to eat this green. Now, I didn't seek out the green potatoes, but while cutting up potatoes, I encountered some green. I just tossed it in the pot with the rest. Am I a ticking time bomb saturated with toxins? Seriously, though, am I? And what is an acceptable manner to throw away the potato? The compost pile? Signed, Don. Well, Don, according to the University of Idaho Cooperative Extension, and they should know something about potatoes, potato tubers are specialized stems of a potato plant, and tubers that are exposed to light will naturally turn green. The green is nothing more than chlorophyll, a harmless compound found in all green plants. However, when potato tubers turn green, there is usually an increase in the glycocolloid compound called solanine. Consequently, it is important to store potatoes in the absence of light to prevent greening. Tubers with a high concentration of solanine will taste bitter and can be harmful if eaten in large quantities. To be safe, it is best not to eat the green part of tubers. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the green part is chlorophyll. We eat lots of chlorophyll. Celery is chlorophyll, full of chlorophyll. Any green vegetable, broccoli, full of chlorophyll. But it's when it's bitter and has the solanine buildup in it. Potatoes have solanine in them anyway to some level, and it becomes more increased and more active when they start to green up. They make chlorophyll and become metabolically active. He also asked about how to dispose of the parts that you don't want anymore. The compost pile works just fine. Be aware that if it isn't a hot compost pile and they don't break down, even little pieces, especially little green pieces, can begin to grow in the inactive portions of a compost pile. And once you have a potato bed, you have potatoes growing there forever, because the little pieces of roots underground don't decompose, and you don't harvest them all, and so they just keep growing every year. But yes, definitely you can put them in the compost pile, the worm bin, something like that. They are an organic that will break down.
Well, now you've created another question. That potato that is growing in a compost pile from that discarded green portion of a potato, can you eat the potatoes that are formed by that new plant in the compost pile?
Sure.
All right. Okay. So this solanine stuff is not something that's going to be spread from generation to generation.
No, it is in the plant. It's in all the plants in the Solanaceae family, eggplant, tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, tobacco, all have solanine in them, and they, to different levels. Some people are particularly sensitive to solanine. My husband happens to be one of those. His sister is another one of those people, and it exacerbates his arthritis. And there is a whole book written about that by a professor that I had at Rutgers. For some of us, it isn't a bother. So all poisonousness, all toxicity has to do with amount. So it's only when you're going to have a large amount of solanine that it's a problem.
And Don, the USDA also says you don't need to discard the green potatoes. Just peel the skins, shoots, and any of the green color because that's where the solanines concentrate. So, Don, go ahead and enjoy those potatoes and just toss away the green portion. You'll be just fine. And congratulations on living so far. Are you thinking of growing fruit trees? Maybe you already are, but you'll want to know more about them. Well, you probably have a million questions, like which fruit trees will grow where I live? What are the tastiest fruits? When's harvest time? How do I care for these trees? The good news is the answers are all nearby. Just go to davewilson.com, click on the Home Garden tab at the top of the page. And in that Home Garden tab, you're going to find a link to their fruit and nut harvest chart so you can be picking delicious, healthy fruits from your own yard for a long growing season. Here in USDA Zone 9, that could be May through December. And you're just a click away with the informative YouTube video series at davewilson.com. As part of that video series, they'll walk you through the simple process of using the Dave Wilson website to find their trees either at a nearby local nursery or at a mail order source. That's Dave Wilson Nursery, the nation's largest grower of fruit trees for the backyard garden. They've got planting tips, taste test results, and information about their revolutionary backyard orchard culture techniques. That'll explain how you can have a cornucopia of different fruit trees in a small backyard. Your harvest to better health begins at davewilson.com. We like to answer your garden questions here on the Garden Basics Podcast. Debbie Flower is here, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor. She's got the knowledge for this kind of stuff. And we get a question from Georgia, from Sam, who writes in, I planted some carrots, beets, kohlrabi in early spring, and when I went to harvest them, I noticed something strange. Most of the beets were missing the roots. Some had developed a nub of a root with soil caked on them and a mold that was a white substance on the caked soil. The same with the carrots. The ones that did develop were stunted with that same caked soil with white mold. I discarded all the material, added some plant tone, topped the beds with compost, and went on to plant my summer garden. At first, the garden seemed to be thriving, but slowly crops started dying off. My scarlet runner beans went from vibrant green to a yellow color. The bell peppers that were doing so well are now exhibiting the same yellow discoloration. The indeterminate tomatoes started wilting overnight. I've already discarded my Sweet 100 tomato, and I'm seeing the same thing happen to my Sun Gold tomato. Most recently, the marigolds planted in the raised bed, which seemed healthy and were flowering, also wilted. And when I pulled up the marigold, I noticed the root mass had this white, fuzzy mold reminiscent of what was on the stunted spring root crops. The raised bed that I garden in has an eastern exposure and drip irrigation. Well, there's a question that raises more questions, Debbie.
It sure does. There's a lot of information there in that question. One is the variety of species of plants that were affected by the problem. Another is it went over different seasons. It wasn't just spring when it might have been just cold and crappy weather, or summer when it's hot and maybe too dry. And then the white growth he saw. Now, white growth isn't always bad. If you have a lot of compost, sometimes you can even open a bag of compost and there's some white growth right there. White growth is fungus growing on plant parts. Maybe they're broken down plant parts like in a compost pile, or maybe they're actively growing plant parts and there are different funguses that will attack live stuff versus dead stuff. But it's not always bad. But what the damage he was seeing, the lack of thriving in his crops was amazing.
Yeah, and whenever I hear about something like that, I got to think, okay, tell me about your soil, Sam. And I asked him that. I said, tell me about your soil, Sam.
You did. Very good question.
And he said, funny you should mention that. There's a company, I won't name the company, that has recently gained a lot of popularity among some organic growers here in Georgia. Last year, when I used their soil in my grow bags, my tomatoes and peppers got all gnarly, stunted, and died. Turns out the soil was contaminated by aminopyrrolid, and we've talked about that before in terms of, I believe it was horse manure.
Yeah, it's used on grasses and certain weeds. Yeah.
He says, I got rid of all that grow bag soil, reached out to the company. They refunded the cost of the compost and assured me that the problem was being addressed. This year, once again, naive me, I decided to give them another chance. The compost is really in the top couple inches of the raised bed, so maybe I could just scrape that top layer off, maybe?
So this year he's got an overgrowth.
Yeah.
He brought in, it sounds like it came in with the soil. We have no proof. Yeah. It's something that can be tested by a laboratory. I believe after looking into the funguses that would cause that kind of damage on those crops, I believe it is something called Phytophthora, which is there are many different species of Phytophthora that attack different kinds of plants. So that was one thing I took into consideration, the fact that very many different unrelated plants were damaged by this fungus. The pattern of the fungus growing on the roots was another thing that took into consideration. And as I said before, the seasons, which is horrible. It's just horrible because you either have Phytophthora or you don't. It's very difficult to get rid of. Solarization, as you recommended.
Yeah, soil solarization in the summertime with clear plastic for 6 to 8 weeks can do in a lot of plant pathogens. Phytophthora, though, I'm not so sure.
Right, and has this soil moved on a tool, on a shoe, whatever, to another part of the yard, then wherever it goes, it's going to have an effect. I might consider scraping the stuff off the surface and driving it over to the company and leaving it on somebody's desk and asking for my money back again. But I would take some to a cooperative extension office or ag commissioner's office, and see if they will test it for you. If not, you may have to go to an agricultural lab and have it tested. I believe there's the ELISA test. Is that the one that's used on Phytophthora? I believe it can be tested for. I should check that, by a laboratory. But once it has come in contact with your soil, with your tools, with your whatever your raised bed, if it's a raised bed, it's there. You can't get rid of it easily at all. So the Phytophthora resistance is what you're going to have to look for.
So that brings up another garden rule. You might call this rule Debbie Flower gone crazy because she recommends cleaning your tools after every use. Well, this would be clean your tools every time you stick it in the ground before you move to another part of the soil, because you might be spreading your own problem.
Right.
Now, there is a disease called white mold, and usually the symptoms are soil that's too wet and not enough air circulation between plants, being it's drip irrigation, unless it's really heavy clay. And yes, I know there is clay soil in Georgia, but if this is in raised beds, you probably don't have that soil in the raised bed, do you? And not enough air circulation between plants. And he mentioned that he was practicing square foot gardening.
Yes, so he was setting himself up for some fungal diseases and even insect diseases when plants are too close together or plant parts are too close together and there's dampness. Then you're setting yourself up for problems. The air can't get through, the plant can't get dry off, and then fungus and bacteria, which need 6 to 8 hours of free water, so a free droplet of water to germinate their spore and infect the plant, can go to town because the air can't get in there and dry out. And insects like aphids can start going wild because they're predators. The things that eat them, the things we call beneficial insects, can't get in there to attack them either. So you need to space the plants according to recommended spacing, which is on a seed packet. It's sometimes on the tag you buy it with, and it's in references.
Yeah, usually for your summer vegetables or your annuals, like marigolds, the usual spacing depends on the eventual size, but it's usually for like marigolds, maybe 12 to 18 inches, 24 for the really tall African marigolds. And for tomatoes, probably 36 inches. And for peppers, I would go at least 18 inches.
Right, I agree. And I was right, it is the ELISA test for Phytophthora. And so my plant pathology professor in graduate school should be proud because I got that answer wrong on the final. But
Not that you would hold a grudge.
No, it was my fault I got it wrong, but I obviously have learned it now.
You'd make a great Catholic. You really would. The guilt. Not that, me missing misspelling the word thief in the 5th grade spelling bee and losing to Lucille Gibb was ever a problem for me throughout the rest of my life.
And I bet you've never misspelled thief again.
I've never misspelled thief again.
See, that's how we learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, she had it easy. I misspelled thief, then she got to spell it correctly because what are you going to do? You're just going to switch around the I and the I. Yeah, and, then she never gave me the time of day again. But that's a different story. Anyway, Sam.
Impacted you.
Yeah, it did impact me, yes.
I'm sorry, Sam. I'd
try soil solarization.
I would try soil solarization. There is the ELISA test to get your soil tested, and move the bed. Leave it alone. Don't move the soil with it. I would be really mad at that company that sold you this stuff.
Don't buy it again, Sam.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. No. It's like, Sam, good luck. It's coming Saturday, August 5th. It's Harvest Day at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. It's put on by the UC Master Gardeners of Sacramento County. And Harvest Day features speakers, education tables, garden vendors, food trucks, and your chance to explore the beautiful 1-acre garden that is designed for you, the backyard gardener, to take home ideas that you can use in your own yard. The Fair Oaks Horticulture Center was built and is maintained by Sacramento County Master Gardeners. It features areas dedicated to growing berries, herbs, fruit trees, vegetables, a vineyard, native plants, water-efficient plants, and a lot more. Plus, there are sections dedicated to composting, and that includes worm composting. On Harvest Day, each area is staffed by master gardeners who are eager to answer your garden questions. At the dozens of educational tables, you're going to get information from professional nursery people, irrigation specialists, the Audubon Society, soil experts, the master food preservers, local garden clubs, water experts, honeybee, and native bee specialists. Vendors will include Northern California nurseries, exotic plants, cactus and succulents, mushroom growing kits, and more. And the speakers, they're going to be talking about landscape trees, attracting pollinators, and myself and America's favorite retired college horticulture professor, Debbie Flower, will be talking at 8:30 that morning about tips for saving time, money, and water in the garden. Someone once said it's the best garden event in Northern California. Oh, wait, I said that. But it's true. And best of all, it's free. Harvest Day at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. It's Saturday, August 5th, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's in Fair Oaks Park in Sacramento County. Check today's show notes for a link with more details and maps of Harvest Day. Hope to see you there. Here we go again. Another multi-day bout of triple-digit temperatures is hitting somewhere in North America right now. This is going to be the case for the balance of the summer, possibly into early fall. So, what should a gardener do if the plants in the outdoor vegetable and flower garden start showing drooping leaves when that temperature tops 100 degrees, or 110 degrees, or even higher? Plus, we talk with master gardener and fruit tree expert Quentin Young about ways to protect your fruit tree orchard during a heat wave. It's all in the current Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and mini podcast, Drooping Leaves versus Heat Waves. If you're already a Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter subscriber, it's probably in your email waiting for you right now. Or you can start a subscription. It's free. Find the link to the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast in today's show notes or on the Substack app. Or you can sign up at the newsletter link at our homepage, gardenbasics.net. Debbie Flowers here. We like to delve into the email bag that you send your questions to at the Garden Basics podcast. You can send them to Fred at farmerfred.com. You can go to gardenbasics.net and fill out the contact box with your question. And, of course, you can call us 916-292-8964, 916-292-8964, speakpipe.com/gardenbasics, where you can leave the question via your computer. Or if you send it for whatever reason to the Lodi News Sentinel newspaper, since I've written a column for them, a garden column, a weekly garden column for them for longer than most Americans have been alive. It's like 40 years, 30.
Wowie.
Somewhere between 30 and 40 years. Anyway, so this comes from Sunny in Lodi, and Sunny says, I have read your garden column in the Lodi Home and Real Estate section for years. It's very informative. I just love the things to do in the garden this week section. Well, thank you. She reads it to her husband every weekend. She points out, though, that our low boxwood hedge along our pathway right next to our lawn is having a problem with cat urine. My husband does not want to put poison because of lawn and lawn watering. Is there any home remedy we can try? You don't point out if you saw the damage or you smelled the damage. Usually with cat urine, it's a smell the damage situation. And I'm always amazed at what I learned from readers' questions. I had not realized that the odor of cat urine is similar to the smell of English boxwoods when they're in bloom in springtime.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always used to the smell of blooming pear trees.
Yeah.
And I always thought, oh, it's bee vomit. But I guess it's actually just the smell of the flowers of the pear tree.
Okay. Bee vomit, huh?
Yeah, bee vomit. But English boxwoods, when they're in bloom in springtime, if it is indeed your nose, not your eyes, that's just an issue with the smell of the flower. Well, I wrote that back to Sunny, and she wrote back and says, these are Japanese boxwoods, which, by the way, don't have that smelly problem. And there are patches of dead spots on top. My husband has seen cats on top of them, but never dogs. My husband has not noticed any smell. Congratulations to those cats that can balance on top of a boxwood.
Right. And having had cats all my life, I don't think a cat would sit in the plate, would urinate in the plate it sits.
It'd be a very tough balancing act, too, to do that. I mean, how would it not fall into the bush?
Right. They like to dig a hole.
Yeah.
And although some cats, the territorial ones will back up to things and spray them. That is true.
Or males.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll do that. But then you wouldn't see the damage on the top. It would be along the sides.
Yes, it would.
So that takes us to another spray issue, and that would be errant herbicide spray. And I'm wondering if there was drift, if at some point in the last year, somebody had applied something that contained glyphosate, for example, to control weeds nearby, and your boxwood was downwind from that, and you noticed branches dying back and what they look like. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture of it because, for instance, with roses, when there's glyphosate damage on rose bushes, it is a twisted, gnarled mess when the new growth comes out the following spring.
Right. And when I worked for Cooperative Extension, I was actually called out. It was summer, late spring, I guess, to an area of gnarled blackberry bushes. And they were just coming out of bud.
Okay. So it's coming out the new growth.
Yes, the new growth is heavily damaged. And it was Roundup.
All right. And boxwoods would have most of their growth, I would think, out at the top.
At the ends of the branches, yes. But she does say that the low boxwood hedge is along their pathway. We don't know what their pathway is made of, but many people here and in Lodi have pathways made of decomposed granite, into which weeds will grow. Mm-hmm. And herbicides are commonly used to control those weeds.
Mm-hmm. Or if it's next to a lawn, what was sprayed on the lawn?
Yes.
Yeah. Was somebody killing weeds on the lawn? Was there some sort of post-emergent herbicide used on a windy day? I'm more a fan. If you're going to be using glyphosate to kill weeds and the weeds are near plants that are desirable, get a spray device that basically has sort of a funnel on the end or a cup where you can just basically cover that weed
instead of
spray it.
Broadcasting everywhere and getting the herbicide on everything.
Or carry a big piece of cardboard around with you.
Right. I see that done commercially.
Mm-hmm. The other problem with spraying glyphosate, a weed killer, one brand of glyphosate is Roundup. One other problem they have with that is, okay, you know not to spray on a windy day, but even if the air is still in the winter and it's a foggy day, the droplets from the glyphosate can remain suspended in the air and slowly drift towards other plants. That the humidity level plays a part in that as well. So you're going to have to ask yourself, okay, when was the last time you used a weed killer, or your lawn service used a weed killer, or your neighbor was using a weed killer? And you may have to really rustle through the brain to come up with that answer. I've had similar questions like that where, months later I'll get a reply, oh, that's right, I had somebody out spraying around the yard, on the back of an ATV.
Right. Yeah. And she says the cats are sitting on top of the bushes and that they notice broken branches on top. Well, that goes together.
Yeah. Wait.
Yes.
Why are they on the top? Are they trying to jump over and they couldn't make it?
I have a cat that likes to jump on top of the mounding grasses, or like deer grass, ornamental grasses.
That bends under you.
Right, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Unless that boxwood has been trimmed so many times, it's basically just...
Well, that went through my mind.
A slate of green on top.
Or that they trimmed it too far, waited too long. If you get down into old wood... I think boxwood will regrow.
Yeah, boxwood regrows.
But
junipers would have
time.
a problem.
Yeah, it takes time, and it may have been pruned very low. There are dead spots on top, but they just haven't had a chance to grow new leaves yet.
So I wonder what would happen if you just pruned out the dead parts, the damaged parts.
Well, I'd want to check that they're dead first.
Yeah.
Which would mean taking a thumbnail and starting near the broken tip and working backwards and scraping the side. And if it's alive, the bark comes off pretty easily and you see green underneath.
Yep. That's
if it's alive, then I'd just leave it alone and let it grow back.
Could you do the bend or break test on those little branches as well, where you just gently bend it, but if it snaps, it's dead?
Depends how old they are. If they're very young, yes. If they're older, they're harder to bend and they may not break even if you do bend them, if they're dead.
Yeah. How's that for an answer? I don't know.
Yeah, send pictures.
However... I will have a link in today's show notes from the University of Minnesota with pictures of herbicide-damaged boxwoods. Mm-hmm. So you can take a look at those pictures, Sonny, and see if...
it looks like what you're seeing. Yeah, she says there are patches of dead spots on top. That's the only symptom I'm seeing in her email.
Yeah.
It was in her response. So I think it's either just broken because the cats are sitting on top of it, or... that it was pruned so low they got into leafless wood.
Check the show notes for that link to herbicide-damaged boxwoods from the University of Minnesota Cooperative Extension. Debbie Flower, thanks for your help on this.
Yeah, you're welcome, Fred.
Today's Garden Basics flashback episode is the most listened to episode ever, and it has to do with America's second favorite garden-grown vegetable, cucumbers. It's episode 266, Cucumber Basics. Gardeners love their cucumbers, and we delve into the best techniques for growing and caring for them, and that includes troubleshooting cucumber problems. Leading our journey, of course, will be the self-admitted cucumber aficionado, as well as being America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, Debbie Flower. Check out this week's flashback episode number 266, Cucumber Basics. It's from last May. Find a link to it in today's show notes, or at the podcast player of your choice, or you can look it up at our homepage, gardenbasics.net. The Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast comes out once a week on Fridays. Plus, the newsletter podcast that comes with the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter continues, and that will also be released on Fridays. Both are free, and they're brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. The Garden Basics podcast is available wherever podcasts are handed out, and that includes our homepage, gardenbasics.net. And that's where you can also sign up for the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast. That's gardenbasics.net, or you can use the links in today's show notes. And thank you so much for listening.